Good morning and welcome to the 2016 Napa Valley Harvest Press Conference. I'm delighted to introduce our moderator for today's conference, Sara Schneider, wine editor with Sunset Magazine.
Thanks so much. It's really great to be here in sort of this last lap in Harvest 2016. And to let us know how it's been going and how it's going now, we have three industry pros here. To my left, we have Michael Silacci, who's the winemaker at Opus 1. To his left, Brittany Pederson with Silverado Farming Company. And finally, on the far left to me, right to you, we have Caleb Mosley with Michael Wolf Vineyard Services. So Michael, let me just start with you with sort of the core issue here. How would you describe this growing season in comparison to previous ones and to the norm, if there is a norm at this point?
Yeah, there really isn't a norm, but I would say it's like a bicycle ride on the Silverado Trail. There are not a lot of hills, but you have to put a little bit of effort into it every now and again, a little bit of a struggle. 15, it was like a sprint and then a climb up the Oakville Grape at the end. So then we've had wet years in 11, but I think this year has been just beautiful.
Sounds like a Cinderella year. Brittany, what are you seeing?
I would have to agree. I think that this year has been a marathon rather than the sprint that we've had the last few years with the heat spikes and whatnot. It's been fairly moderate this year, so I think that it's been a very welcome change from the last few years.
Sounds pretty good. Caleb, would you agree?
Most definitely agree. We're seeing just smiles all over the Napa Valley right now, from the crews out in the field all the way up to the winemakers and the people doing the fermentation. So
that sounds like the smile of winding down here.
Let's
talk for just a second about crop yields. That seemed to be an issue last year. They came in low across the board. How is it looking this year? Again, Michael.
Well, we're up 7% compared to last year, which was, as you suggested, a little bit low, but that had to do a little bit with the heat spill as well in the middle of September. And we're 4% down over the 10-year average, 5-year average, 10% down. So.
Are you seeing kind of those same numbers, Brittany?
Yeah, everything is pretty site-specific, depending on if you're on the valley floor or up in some of the mountain ranges. But I think for the most part, yields have been up since last year, which has been pretty nice. Last year we had a pretty low yielding year, so it's been a really good year. For the most part, depending on variety and depending on where in the mountains you are. I would say for the majority of the vineyards, we're definitely kind of back up to average.
Caleb, same picture?
yeah, there's a certain part of the vintage that was almost a bit of a tale of two vintages. Prior to, we had one little heat blip. It wasn't very, very drastic, especially compared to what we went through in 2015. But it did push sugars along, and we did see some crop reduction for anything that was harvested post the last weekend in September when that heat came through. Again, it wasn't drastic and it didn't reduce things greatly, but we didn't see the same types of yields we did prior to that. Bit of a tale of two harvests.
So in the end, it kind of comes down to quality. What is the quality of the fruit that you're getting? How would you describe that? Let's start in the middle. Brittany, what are you seeing with the quality of the fruit?
So far, what I've seen, great quality from most all varieties, and I think that has to do with a great balance between the vines and the yields. We're pretty in balance this year, which has been pretty nice. The last few years, it's been a little bit off kilter, so we're a little bit back to average, but seeing that balance has really come through in the quality, I think.
Sounds pretty optimistic. Caleb?
Yeah, I think the cooler vintage overall really helped to preserve a sense of freshness in the wines, and a lot of winemakers were able to pick when they felt like it was optimal for them, as opposed to being pushed into a pick decision, which is what happened over the past few years. So beautifully resolved tannins, really in-depth, deep color, and nice freshness and acidity to the wine. So I'm really looking forward to see how these fermentations make their way through.
And Michael, finally, at Opus 1, you're just synonymous with quality here. How's it looking for you this year?
It's really great. We're really happy, as Caleb and Brittany both said, with the pace of harvest was amazing. The development of the fruit flavors, we could pretty much pick and choose where we wanted to be. Fresh fruit flavors or a little bit of ripe fruit flavors, but nothing green really, except the inherent part of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. But no, it was really beautiful. The Petit Verdot was one of the first varieties that came in, which is unusual. So.
Just to extrapolate that a little bit further, there was one vineyard we started our Cabernet harvest on the 26th of August, and we're finishing our Cabernet harvest on the same vineyard. So in this very same place, we had a time span of 48 days between the very first cab harvest and our very last cab harvest. That
Wow.
kind of goes to prove that you could pick when you wanted to this year.
You had some good choices this year.
Yeah, it's exciting to do that.
That's sounding good. Let's get to some issues that you've been dealing with in the valley here. One of them has to be water, I'm thinking. We did have a wetter winter this last year, but word is we're still in a drought in California. How is the water availability here? Caleb, let's start with you.
We are exceptionally fortunate in the Napa Valley in that we're framed by two mountain ranges on either side that direct water towards the valley floor. That, coupled with the fact that we're growing the European wine grape and mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, it's a very thrifty variety to begin with. So we're not using much water compared to other agricultural crops in California. We consider ourselves extremely fortunate, and yet to grow the finest wine grapes, we also try and irrigate only when we need to and only the amount that we need to. And there's a lot of new technology out there that's helping us preserve the water that we do have. At Michael Wolf Vineyard Services, we use Thule technologies, which is a type of environmental sensor that lets us know how much water the vines are using on a daily basis on a very precise level. And we can make really, really informed decisions on when and how much to irrigate based on that information.
Michael, how about you and the water issue?
We've been very fortunate, as Caleb said, with timely rainfall. We've gone to a different type of irrigation system where we really increase the interval between irrigations and then give more water at one time, driving the roots down deeper so that they can find water on their own. We use the old-fashioned technique of the best thing you can put on your vineyards, your own 2 feet. So we walk the vineyards a lot, touch leaves, and we do use a pressure bomb. We do stem water potential, so it's like taking the blood pressure of a vine. And that's been the way we've been managing irrigations. But we've been, first year I was here, we reduced water usage using these techniques by 40%.
Wow, so you're adjusting to the availability. Brittany, is that true in your world as well?
Yeah, I would agree. We utilize both techniques, both technology and walking the vineyards as well at Silverado Farming. But also, I think it really helped to start the season with full soil profiles. We hadn't had that in 3 years, so it was a little bit different and very much what contributed to the vine growth this year, which is sort of why we ended up with that great balance between fruit and vine balance and the quality of the grapes as well. Starting with the full vines and having that leaf area where last year, we struggled sometimes to get full canopies. So I think was a great help.
We're kind of bumping up against the whole issue of climate change, and it has to be affecting your kind of farming as much as any there is. And I'm curious about what are the key issues you're monitoring, watching, adjusting to when it comes to overall climate change. Michael, how about you?
Well, we're looking at rootstock that are a little bit more drought tolerant. We are not burning any brush anymore. We stopped burning brush in 2003. So we're grinding it and composting it. And also with sprays, we're using less water with the products we're applying to the vineyards. As I said earlier about irrigation, but we're really looking at this as trying to not focus on overall climate change. We know that's occurring. We see it everywhere in the world, but really looking at it as we've seen since I've been in the valley, fluctuation in weather in a given vintage. So we're trying
Which you're always dealing with.
Yes, yes. It's like being in a keto match with Mother Nature. Just try to channel her into something positive.
Brittany, how about you?
Yeah, I would say the same. I think that, looking at different heat spikes, sort of at the extended forecast, rain, if we get it, when we get it, I think are all important factors. Growing degree days, I think, is something also that we kind of tend to focus on. And it's been great that, with the new age of technology, there's all sorts of new weather stations and different things that we can use to monitor that. And so it's really getting it down to farming on a vine by vine basis and trying to, use all these different tools to help us manage this, because it's not something that we're going to be able to get away from. So something in sort of managing how we deal with it, and how do we deal with it in the most sustainable way, I think.
That makes sense. Caleb, what would you add?
We aim to farm for resiliency. We are meticulous with our canopy management. We want to make sure that we have robust growth early in the season, and we position that growth properly to protect ourselves against the difficulties, for lack of a better word, that Mother Nature
He's
throws
still
our
smiling.
way. Yeah, because they're fun challenges. So in the short-term sense, every vintage we're trying to build a resilient vineyard. In the long-term sense, we're seeing issues like warmer nighttime temperatures than we've seen in the past, which is having a big impact on how the vines respond to disease pressure. Insects tend to like it when it's a warmer winter or warmer nighttime temperatures. They thrive quite a bit more, so we've seen some interesting pressure with insects too. So there's a lot of changes on the horizon that we're dealing with all the time that we're trying to make the best decisions that we can as we move forward, but it's definitely keeping us on our toes, that's for sure.
When we're talking about farming, we're talking about vineyard workers, of course, and one issue that's been in the news lately on that front is overtime pay because of legislation statewide requiring it. And I'm really curious about how that affects your workers and your businesses. Brittany.
I think at this point, everybody and every company is looking into what they need to do, and as everybody will be the different amount of employees that they have, different types of employees that they have. I think that they're looking into how to best manage that, and the answer will be different for every single company. But I think it's great what we have here. We have some great resources. Farm Worker Foundation, I think, is great in providing different tools and trainings and help and support in all different types of ways. Whether it's learning how to manage that, just sort of a good resource to use. But I think it will change for every single operation. No one is the same, and the needs of the employees will all be differently. And so trying to manage that with the amount of hours that we need to work in the vineyard, it will be changing and varying depending on what company it is.
Caleb, how's it affecting your business at this point?
Well, so we're not going to see any of these changes take place until, I believe, 2019 when they first start rolling these changes through. It'll affect every crop differently, every little sect of California differently, and it'll affect the Napa Valley differently too. I'd second what Brittany said about the Napa Farm Worker Foundation, that we do a lot of amazing things educationally and provide a lot of services for the farm workers in the valley here. And then we also provide great wages and benefits across the board, and I think most companies in Napa Valley are doing an excellent job with that. So we've got a lot of positive things moving towards the Napa Valley and keeping a great workforce here. I know at Opus you guys are doing a fantastic job as well with the employees that you have and how you treat them. So it'll be a challenge. We're yet to see exactly how it's going to impact everything in California agriculture, but we feel pretty well poised to handle it here in Napa.
We're hinting at what is really a labor shortage, and Michael, Caleb just mentioned what you're doing here. Could you describe some of the details?
Yeah, we feel that the vineyard workers are perhaps the most valuable resource we have after the grapevine. Well, because anyway, and
Chicken and egg here.
Chicken and egg, yes. But we invest a lot of time and effort in education. And we send a lot of our, actually our whole team, to all of the educational seminars that the Grapegrowers put on. Everyone knows about the Farm Worker Foundation. I'm very proud to be sitting next to these two because both Mike Wolf and Pete Richmond have committed long-term to donating money to support the Farm Worker Foundation. Not only that, they invest their time as well, so they're very much involved in it. But no, we really feel that the key is education and recognition. When people come up with ideas in the vineyard, we implement them if they make sense in the long term, and they are recognized for it. So a happy vine needs a happy vineyard worker.
Well said. I'd like to get to a little bit of technology because I think there's a lot on that horizon, and specifically drones have been in the news across a lot of industries and recreation, I guess, too. Brittany, could you speak to what's happening with research and using drones in the vineyard?
Sure. I think that, they're finding what use they are is sort of what's going on right now, or where they can be best utilized. They're using them for vineyard surveying, photography, and they, passing that down into the winery and marketing as well. Also for utilization for applying crop protection as well is something that I personally was looking into within my company. We did an in-house trial this last year. We'll continue to utilize that as well this next 2017 season. So I think it's important to sort of find out where these uses might be. Technology is always ever improving, so it's something that I think that we need to look further into and seeing how we can use that on a, and use that as one of our tools in our toolbox.
That sounds pretty cool, actually. On that note, I think we need to go to some viewer questions that we have. And the first one I'm seeing is, what is the biggest challenge facing growers this year? Michael, let's throw that one to you.
I really think it's the labor situation. We are able to cope with it because we're able to work with Silverado Farming Company to help us support our teams with a few more people during key times. And also we're able to manage, it forces us to be better winemakers and viticulturists. Natalie Buckland and I are out in the vineyard looking at every block to see where fruit is ripe, and we're bringing in a steady amount of fruit every day to keep people happy and the wine flowing. So.
How about challenges to you, Brittany?
Sure, I think that every year is different. Every growing season is different, so the challenges will be different. I think that labor definitely is on the hot topic right now, as far as there just being a shortage of people wanting to get into vineyard work. I think so. Preserving that workforce is really sort of, I think, what we need to focus on and be after, and keeping them safe, healthy, happy, and keeping them here. Because really, kind of like Michael said, we can't do this without them. They are our most important factor in all of the great wine that we produce here, and that's the number one.
Yeah, I think we can't forget that.
No,
Caleb, would you add something?
Viticulture and fine wine is all about great timing, and you need to have the right people in the right place, the right time, with the right skill set to do these practices at the right time. And fortunately, at Mike Wolf Vineyard Services, we were able to keep up with the growth this year, and we were able to get enough people, but it does get challenging as we move forward. Other than that, the other challenge, we had a bear in one vineyard. Ate a lot of grapes, but
What
that was
variety
kind
do
of fun.
bears like around here?
This particular bear was going after the Cabernet Franc, but I've heard they're partial to Merlot as well, so I'll wait and see when that happens.
Yeah, take out that Merlot. Another question we're getting here is about vineyard redevelopment. We're hearing that a lot of that is happening. Is that accurate? And what's happening on that front, Michael?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is due to diseases, and again, with the climate change, you have insects transmitting diseases to vines, and we have now found the red blotch, which was present. They found it or they detected it in a leaf from 1944, but that's just cropping up, and that we have to do redevelopment. We have to remove vines that are affected, and in certain areas pull out entire blocks. The key, though, is working very closely with the nurseries and making sure that they are testing their mother vines for these different crop diseases and viruses, and making sure they're supplying us with plants that are very healthy so that we can get to vineyards that are 50 years old or more.
Yeah, they don't last forever. Brittany, what's happening on your front?
I would agree with Michael, but I also think that sometimes the coming of aging of vines, sometimes they just start to produce a lot less. So I think that in terms of that, different wineries and growers and producers will also start to sort of get on a redevelopment plan, just to get a new vine in there, and that can produce a lot more than maybe a 68-year-old vine. Yields definitely decrease after time, so I think that would maybe be another reason on top of the disease pressure going on.
Just sheer age.
Yep.
Caleb, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we all want to keep grapevines in the ground as long as we possibly can, but technology changes and our knowledge of how vines grow and what rootstocks work in what situation changes as well. You'll see a lot of vineyards in the Napa Valley used to be a very narrow hedgerow vertical shoot positioning system. And we're noticing and installing ourselves a lot of vineyards that have a wider canopy architecture, so an open cross-arm system, or even some systems that are going back to a much more wide trellis system. So as we are realizing what climate change is presenting us with, we're finding that there's different and most time better ways to install a new vineyard. So I think it has a bad rap to a certain degree. Oh, you're ripping out all your vines, what are you doing? But when we're putting these in, we're putting in new vineyards with much thought, improved varieties, virus-free varieties and selections, as Michael mentioned. And we're ending up in a good place because of it.
Every 30 years you got to change your roof, so
I think we have time maybe for one more. And the question is, what new technologies are you using this season? What's next? Looking forward, what do you see developing? Caleb, let's start on your end.
Well, let's see. We've been doing a couple trials with some UAVs or drones, and we're curious to see how they're going to fit into our farming practice. We've been using aerial photography for a long time, whether it be thermal imaging or multispectral imaging, to give us ideas of where vigorous areas are. But with these new tools, we're being allowed to go into the vineyard at much more frequent timing. So we can do a pass in the vineyard and then fly the vineyard, take several images at the same time, and be able to utilize that imagery to make a really detailed irrigation decision or a detailed canopy management or fertilization decision. So we're still fleshing out how that's exactly going to work for us, but I see that on the horizon as something that will impact viticulture and agriculture in general.
Sounds pretty critical. Brittany?
One thing that we're going to continue using this next year is a drone, a UAV for crop production or crop protection. And then also one thing that I'm really excited about is the GIS mapping. We started with that this last year, and it really has been really beneficial and really able to hone in on those small decisions and really farm everything on a vine-by-vine basis, which I think is sort of where we're at this day and age and in the Napa Valley, is really being able to monitor everything on a smaller scale, a more detailed scale. So GIS has really helped with that.
Sounds like smart farming.
Yes, very
Michael,
much so.
how about for you?
I'm really looking forward to some of the things they're doing with drones at UC Davis. They have drones that you can set a flight pattern, and they can go in and they're looking at ways to monitor ripeness as they fly, and leaf water moisture. So you can, let's say during harvest, send a drone out and get some ideas about where ripe areas are, and then go in and double check those and use it as a reference to help you make better decisions harvesting. But that's a few years down the road.
Farming isn't what it used to be. That's very cool. Well, I think our time is just about up. Thank you so much for being here and giving us a snapshot, which sounds like we're in a pretty good position with Napa Valley for harvest 2016. So Michael, Brittany, Caleb, thanks so much, and thanks for watching.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.